Welcome. My name is Linda Saunders-Paquette, and I serve as the Executive Director of New Futures in Concord, New Hampshire. New Futures is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to reduce alcohol and other drug problems by focusing on public policy and advocacy. We have partnered with Concord Community TV to bring you a series of programs on the issue of alcohol and other drugs in New Hampshire. Today's program is focused on the ongoing efforts to support veterans who are returning to New Hampshire after their military service. And I'm delighted today to have two people who really work in the trenches of this area each and every day. First, to my immediate right, I'd like to introduce Joe Moncher. Joe serves as the Chief of the Bureau of Community-Based Military Programs at the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. And to Joe's right is Sarah Ward. Sarah is an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer who has been spending the past 11 months at New Futures, and she serves as the Vetcorps Prevention Coordinator in the state of New Hampshire. So welcome to you both. When did the Department of Health and Human Services create the Bureau of Community-Based Military Programs, and why did they do it?
The New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services created the Military Programs Bureau almost 6 years ago. And they created this bureau recognizing that the VA, the vet centers, and our National Guard, as amazing as those organizations are, cannot serve veterans on their own. That we really need a coordinated approach, that civilian agencies need to be at the table, that the responsibility in serving our military and their families is just too important. So it needs to be an effort and a responsibility that belongs to all of us.
And how did you end up being the Chief of the Bureau?
Well, I'm sure honored to hold this position, and almost 6 years ago, leadership from HHS approached me and asked me if I would consider taking on some additional responsibilities that would serve military and their families. And I suggested that perhaps the department needed to create a full-time position, and I sure would be interested in volunteering for that position. And
well, you're a veteran yourself, aren't you?
I'm an Air Force veteran. My brother is a combat Marine who served during Persian Gulf. My sister is an Air Force veteran, and my father is an Army veteran who served during the Korean conflict.
Wow, truly a military family. They have a great person in you to represent these interests.
Well, I'm lucky to have the job I have.
So what are your responsibilities as the Chief of the Bureau?
My responsibilities include really helping to facilitate and support partnerships and partnership projects between our military and our civilian providers. So there's an awful lot of collaborations and initiatives that come under that arena. The position has really evolved over the last 6 years. What I find truly amazing is I have the opportunity and pleasure of working with many civilian agencies that already, as you know, have an awful lot on their plate. And in the last almost 6 years I've been in my position, I don't think I've ever had one organization say, sorry, that's not my job. New Hampshire is a state that has such passion and spirit and heart for serving our military that people are always willing to raise their hand and say, what can I do?
That's great. So in a little later, we'll get into some of the specific commission work that you do. And I know you serve on a lot of committees and commissions. Sarah, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the Vista Vetcorps program.
Absolutely. The AmeriCorps Vista Vetcorps program was created by the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, CADCA, in partnership with the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is where all AmeriCorps Vistas serve under. An AmeriCorps Vista, such as myself, is essentially the domestic Peace Corps doing work in nonprofits around the country. And this particular position really spoke to me because I'm a military dependent. My parents met in the Air Guard about 35 years ago now, and this is a cause that's really near and dear to my heart. So the Vetcorps program calls for coalitions and for Vetcorps to be housed in those coalitions and to expand the capacity for veterans and military issues all around the state, be it in mental health related issues, substance abuse, homelessness, employment, you name it, just whatever calls for it, we're there. Now, New Futures isn't a coalition, but it's certainly the right sort of organization to house a Vista Vetcorps member.
So what are your specific responsibilities in your position at New Futures?
Sure. My position has been very unique in that I'm the only Vista Vetcorps housed in a policy and advocacy organization across the entire country. So I've done a lot of systems level change this year as the Vista Vetcorps member for the entire state of New Hampshire. There are 3 others who are housed specifically in coalitions that do work for their region, but I act as a conduit to take more specific issues up to a state level and funnel it back down to them. So I've done a lot of work on committees and commissions this year as well. It's been very, very amazing. I'm so grateful to be here.
Great. So Joe, how many veterans currently live in New Hampshire and where have they served?
We have about 115,000 veterans, and that's always an interesting question because depending on what stats you look at, you're going to see different numbers. But it's about 115,000. We're losing veterans every day because our older veterans are passing away. In our state, about 45% of our veterans are 65 years and older. We have a very strong Vietnam veteran population. It's at least a third of our state, and in some counties like Carroll County, it's up to 37%. We have about over 7,000 post 9/11 combat veterans. We have about just over 10,000 Korean vets. It's a beautiful mix of a military community in our state.
Wow. And what types of challenges do veterans face when they return home?
Well, they experience all kinds of challenges, including finding a job, substance abuse issues, homelessness, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, family issues. They experience a lot of challenges that a lot of our civilian population experience, but they come with the horrors of war behind them. They come with the experience of trauma, of combat, and all that brings to their world and their families and their communities.
So can you talk a little bit about what is post-traumatic stress disorder exactly, and what are traumatic brain injuries?
Sure. So post-traumatic stress is experienced by somebody who went through a significant trauma. That trauma could be wartime, it could be a natural disaster, it could be sexual abuse, physical abuse. It's a trauma. Traumatic brain injury impacts the brain. It can come from a blast. It's from an IED, an improvised explosive device. The challenge is for both post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, they're identified as invisible injuries, invisible wounds. So in our community, it's sure easy to identify somebody who has a broken leg or who might be missing a limb, but it's tough to identify our veterans who might be going through some of these challenges. And our veterans are pretty proud and amazing men and women, and they're not individuals who are out there raising their hand saying, I have post-traumatic stress, I have a TBI, and I need help. So one of our challenges in New Hampshire, as well as a challenge across the state, is to help identify these veterans and to create an atmosphere that's comfortable, that's welcoming, and that can truly help them find the services they may need.
So what are some of the symptoms that one might recognize from someone who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury?
Sure. It could be trouble sleeping, nightmares, anxiety, panic attacks, hypervigilance, depression. It could be a host of all of those that when a veteran returns, he or she might not necessarily identify that right out of the gate. He or she might just know that things are different. And of course things are going to be different because of what they went through. And perhaps veterans are hoping that things are going to change. And it takes a while for some of our veterans to recognize that there is an issue. And sometimes it comes from the family recognizing that, that something's different, and I think we should seek help.
Great. Sarah, based on your experience as the Vetcorps volunteer at New Futures, what have you observed or learned about some of the behavioral health issues that our veterans are experiencing?
Oh, wow. I'd say that stigma is all around us, and it certainly is just as present among our military. And it's the number one barrier for them to get access to treatment. And these men and women need to know that things such as PTSD and TBI are all completely normal. And that's why, as part of the Commission's Stigma Subcommittee, we're trying to work to reduce that stigma and to normalize it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the Commission's work in just a second. And one of my questions, though, is do returning veterans experience higher levels of substance abuse problems?
Absolutely, and certainly higher risks of suicide and suicide ideation.
So where can veterans and their families get help for their behavioral health issues?
We would encourage and invite veterans to reach out to either of our VA medical centers. We have one located in Manchester. We also have one located at White River Junction, Vermont. Those two areas are assigned to our state, although a veteran is able to go to any VA across the country. So that's a place to start to see if that veteran is eligible for services. And I suggest the VA because the VA is packed with all kinds of other services that could benefit a veteran. We also have the vet centers. We have a vet center located in Keene, in Hooksett, and also in Berlin. And although we currently don't have licensed alcohol and drug counselors at these vet centers, those vet center counselors can help to identify the challenges a veteran might be experiencing and partner with the VA or with other organizations. We also have a New Hampshire National Guard that we're honored to have a general, Major General Bill Riddell, who really has a goal and a mission to serve all veterans. And there's a woman by the name of Sue Brown, who's the Director of Psychological Health for the New Hampshire National Guard, and she also sees an awful lot of veterans where a veteran could see her and she could help identify, is this a substance abuse issue? Is this post-traumatic stress? Is it a traumatic brain injury? What is it? And let me assist in finding the services you might need. The Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services at HHS also has a resource guide that can help direct people into different areas. And of course, New Futures does amazing work, and I have to thank Linda and your organization for bringing Sarah Ward our way, because she has been a joy, and she has really helped coordinate services and help find the path and integrate services in many ways. And that's a huge goal, and it's a huge challenge in our state, is to really coordinate efforts among our providers, both military and civilian.
So if someone were interested in accessing the resource guide, how would they do that?
They could go on the HHS website and go to the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, and they could look it up through there, or they could call any of the phone numbers from the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services. I'm guessing they could call your office as well, sure. And you could direct them. In our state, there's a group called the Military and Civilian Alcohol and Drug Committee. And this committee has been in place for the last 3 or 4 years and really includes folks from military and civilian organizations who are helping to coordinate efforts. And the first step is really to learn about those services and to learn about the services that each organization provides. We're going through some transition in that group right now, and Sue Brown from National Guard and Lindy Keller from the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services is going to co-chair that committee, and we're also inviting Donna Primera, the mental health director from the Manchester VA, to be a key player in helping us to take it to the next step, to get beyond education and outreach, and to really identify some goals that we can impact this issue.
Great. So one of your many responsibilities is to chair the New Hampshire Commission on Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder and Traumatic Brain Injury. Can you talk a little bit about that commission, how it was created, what its work is?
Sure, I'd love to. So 2.5 years ago, the New Hampshire Legislative Commission on Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder and Traumatic Brain Injury started, and this group has met every month for 2 hours for the last 2.5 years. And it's an amazing group of individuals who really came together to study this issue. So in January of this year, we released a report after looking at this issue in a number of ways. And one of the ways we study this issue is by doing a survey, asking 12 simple questions. We partnered with the UNH Survey Center on these questions, and we received information and responses from 1,200 veterans about, do they think they have post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, and what are the barriers for them in receiving care. We received a response from probably a third were Vietnam vets, about a third were post 9/11 vets, maybe 18% were Persian Gulf, and then a mixture of others. We also did a survey with 80 military and civilian providers. We did a third survey with the New Hampshire Psychological Association. And so we took all of that information and identified some goals, identified some barriers. So the survey was one piece of our outcome and our result. The second piece was healthcare recommendations based on that information. A third piece of the report includes legislation to create a permanent commission on PTSD and TBI, and Governor Hassan signed that legislation about 2 weeks ago. And then the fourth piece of that report includes over a dozen maps. We worked very closely with many organizations throughout the state, especially the VA, in identifying different data that would help give us a snapshot of some of the challenges in our veteran community by county.
Great. So were there specific findings and recommendations that are contained and reflected in that report?
Absolutely. One of the top barriers that were identified by our 1,200 veterans, as well as a lot of the work that the Commission did in the last 2.5 years, is stigma, as Sarah referenced. Another barrier that came up is veterans said that they do not feel understood by the providers who serve them. And they shared that regarding whether it was a military provider or a civilian provider. So that to us, as well as everything else we've been hearing in the last 2.5 years, really spoke to the need of military education, to really educate our civilian providers. Many of our civilian providers came forward and said they would like to help veterans, they would like to serve veterans, but they really needed to understand how to do that. And a third area that came up was, it was really a combination of veterans sharing with us that they did not feel, they didn't know where to go. They didn't feel that help was out there. They felt that help might impact their career, and they didn't feel that the community maybe understood them. So that really was a whole area of concern that again spoke to the need of coordinated care and integrated care. In our state, we're fortunate to have amazing individuals and organizations that want to serve our veterans. Everybody is raising their hand and they want to help. The challenge for a veteran is that can be very overwhelming. Where do you go for services? As you know, Linda, so many organizations have different criteria, have different eligibility, and it makes it very confusing for us, let alone a veteran, to navigate that system. So we really need to do a much better job coordinating those efforts. So as the commission moves forward, and now that it's a permanent commission, we're focusing on 3 areas: stigma reduction, military education, and integrated coordinated care, as well as the continuum of care. And I think these initiatives, to me, are some of the most important things that are happening in our military community right now. We have never had mental health directors from both of our VAs, CEOs from our mental health centers, hospital administration, vet center leadership. We've never had those folks at the table. So we've been talking about this issue for an awful long time. We've never had decision makers at the table who can impact these decisions and make positive change to better serve our military community.
That's great. Sarah, I'm wondering if you could speak to your work on the commission.
Sure. I think it was one of my first few meetings when I first mentioned to Joe as the chair, very humbly in the back, and mentioned the need to look at some of these issues from the perspective which I was sitting from as a military dependent, fairly recent college graduate, and that I was also coming from an alcohol and drug focused organization. And that led to a series of conversations and a partnership between the commission and Vetcorps, and then in turn led to my co-chair position on the commission for the Stigma subcommittee. So I've been looking more closely at that with my fellow co-chair, Nick Tolentino, who is the DAV representative on the commission.
DAV is?
This Disabled American Veterans
Great,
Association. So, and we are trying to tackle that and figure out what our goals and objectives will be and how we'd like to define stigma as a committee, a stigma campaign down the road, and who needs to be at the table to start looking at this issue as something we could normalize, again, as PTSD and TBI is the body's natural reaction to trauma.
And I really have to thank and applaud Sarah, because I think it was probably her first or second meeting, and she was never shy. And she spoke up, and when we looked at membership on the new commission, there's always spirited dialogue about do we include families, or do we need to focus just on veterans? Do we include substance abuse, and if so, in what way? We know we were going to include it, but looking at the representation, how do we include it? How do we include universities? How do we make sure that our young people are engaged? And Sarah, right out of the gate, was very vocal about those issues. And we need that. We need our young people in the state to speak up, because so many of our young people are family members of our military. And again, this issue belongs to all of us. It needs to belong to all of us. And Sarah has reminded us of that.
So I want to ask each of you, if you had a magic wand, sort of what would you do to improve health care for veterans in this state? What is your vision for what the system ought to look like? And then the second part of that question is, how can the public help?
So we would, in a year, it would be wonderful if every civilian healthcare provider in this state would ask the question to an individual during intake or registration, and the question would be, have you ever served in the military? The question is not, are you a veteran? Because what we've learned is everybody defines a veteran differently. I'm a veteran, but I've never identified myself really as a veteran until the last few years, because I never served during combat. And so how can I identify myself as a veteran and stand next to my brother, who's a combat Marine and who gave so much of his life and his heart and his soul in serving our military? So if civilian agencies are better going to be able to serve our veterans if they can identify those veterans. So that would be a wonderful accomplishment at the end of 1 year if we saw a lot more civilian agencies doing that.
That's great. Sarah, what is your vision for how the system can be improved, what it ought to look like?
I would definitely second the Ask the Question initiative that New Hampshire is going to be taking on. And also that for veterans to know that there are a number of individuals at the table, at all sorts of tables at the state level right now, looking at these issues, and they're not alone. And Joe's commission in particular, the Commission on PTSD and TBI, is very transparent, and all these people are very accessible. It doesn't matter what level they are at the VA, or our veterans out amongst the community can reach out and get involved if they'd like, and then there are a number of ways to do that.
And another wonderful outcome would be if whether a veteran goes into a hospital, a family resource center, a VA, a vet center, wherever they go, that agency would do what they can to help the veteran, but would also have a greater understanding of military culture. And if that agency cannot help the veteran, that agency would know who to call. And there would be much greater coordination and communication and collaboration between our agencies. And I think we're getting there, but we have miles to go.
Great. Well, I can't thank you both enough for the incredibly important work that you do to support our veterans in New Hampshire, and for being here today and sharing this information with us. Thank you very much. If you would like to learn more about New Futures and the work that we do, please go to our website, www.new-futures.org. Thank you very much.